everyone, my name is Brianna Nicole. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 18 months old. If you are new to this channel, welcome. I am so happy to have you. So today, this conversation is about to get real. Since this conversation is going to be so real, I do need to make myself a cup of coffee before we get started. I'm going to share my confessions, some of my failures, and really be very vulnerable with all of you about living with type 1 diabetes. I begin. Maybe I can start with my nickname was Diabetic Delinquent. I mean, I'm looking back at it laughing, but in all honesty, it's really not a funny thing. It's not something to glamorize. It's not something to brag about not taking care of your diabetes. Learn from my mistakes because I am so thankful I learned from my own mistakes. There was a time where I lost my insulin pump. I mean, the insulin pump is attached to me. How does someone lose an insulin pump? I have no idea. It was actually never found. I went into DKA multiple times, and to be quite honest, until I joined this community, I had no idea there was even a name for it. I just thought it was actually normal to have your blood sugars get so high to a point where you're so nauseous and you can't hold down food and, are throwing up constantly. I just thought it was just part of, a symptom of high blood sugar. When in reality, I was going into DKA. There were multiple times where I was hospitalized. There was multiple times I couldn't get out of bed. There were times I had to call out of work because my blood sugars were so high. There was a time when my insulin pump had a malfunction. It is an electronic device, malfunctions happen. However, I had no backup. I always thought, it won't happen to me. I don't need to worry about that, where my doctor told me multiple times, if your insulin pump breaks, what will you do? My mindset, I didn't think it was gonna happen. Well, ironically, it did happen, and there's really no surprise. The sad thing is, I didn't know how to inject myself with a needle, and also I didn't even have any needles on me. Whatever the reason may be, I am terrified to inject myself with a needle with insulin. I'm okay with, putting my sensor in, I'm okay with putting a new site for my insulin pump, but injecting insulin is just this huge fear for me till this day, and it's something I am almost ashamed to admit because living with diabetes for 24 years, it is something that I should know how to do to take care of my health and to also save my life. As I'm speaking about this, I can guarantee you, I will make a promise to you that the next time I speak and see my doctor, I am going to learn how to inject myself and get over that fear. It was the anniversary of my boyfriend and I, and we're about to celebrate by going out to dinner. I was so concerned about my hair, my makeup, what am I going to wear? Rushing out the house, making sure I had the reservation. As we were almost there, I comes to find out I forgot my insulin pump. So we had to drive back, and then unfortunately, because of our reservation, we weren't able to sit for dinner because I forgot my insulin pump and was so concerned about everything on how I look on the outside, instead of actually thinking, okay, do I have my medical supplies? What's important? There were times I'm rushing out the house, getting ready to leave, and my insulin pump has no insulin in it. Before the insulin pump, or even before technology, there were times where I had to write my blood sugars down in a notepad, what my blood sugars were for breakfast, dinner, any snacks that I may have, and I used to forge my blood sugars to my doctor, and it was really only hurting myself. There were times I honestly just felt lazy and kept my insulin pump site on more than 3 days, where sometimes 5, 6, 7 days even, to a point where I'm getting notifications on my insulin pump saying that my cartridge is blocked and that insulin can't go through, to where I would just maybe wiggle around the cannula and then just keep trying again rather than putting in a new cannula in my insulin pump and then putting in a new site. I have to stop recording for a second because my dog is legit just staring at me. So I travel a lot. I have family, I'm in another state, so I would travel to go see them. There were times I forgot to bring a needle, so if I do have to change my cannula and add more insulin into my cannula, I didn't have anything to use. There were times where I forgot insulin and would have to go to the hospital. There were times I would even rip out my insulin site on the beach because I didn't want anyone to see my site or at least question what I was wearing. So I would risk having a high blood sugar in order for people to know I wasn't diabetic. There are times I forget a low snack, and then what? My blood sugar goes low, and thankfully at that time I was with my boyfriend. he was able to get me a Gatorade. But what if I was by myself? There was one time when I was working and I was 19 years old and my blood sugar started to go low, but I didn't test myself because I didn't want to test myself in front of my coworker. So instead, I took initiative to take a break and walk across the street to McDonald's. I remember in that parking lot feeling so dizzy to a point where I could have fainted. No joke, I think maybe that was one of my lowest points because I cannot remember another time feeling like that. But it goes to show, instead of me asking my coworker, hey, my blood sugar is low, do you mind going to McDonald's to get me a drink? I took initiative, did it myself, and I'm so thankful because that could have been a lot worse. I could have passed out in the parking lot, I could have hurt myself, I could have, there's just so many scenarios instead of me just being honest with my diabetes. Or there are times where I just don't want to take my insulin pump out in public because I don't want anybody to see. There are times when my insulin pump falls out of my pocket in public and I'm not worried about my sight ripping off. I'm worrying that did anyone see that come out of my pocket? So really my mindset was just so twisted, and it came to a point where I had to stop worrying about what other people thought and just worry about my health and myself and taking care of me. I've learned that everybody is going through something. With diabetes, it's something that we can see externally. If there's a Dexcom on somebody's arm, whether it's an Omnipod, insulin pump, there's all these external factors, a pricker for testing your blood sugar to see that somebody's diabetic. However, there are also internal factors in people that we just may not even see or may not even realize. I've learned that everyone's a walking storybook, and I've never met anybody in my life who made fun of my diabetes, thankfully. So where is this fear coming from? It's so easy with this disease to feel alone, especially if you don't have anybody else in your family with type 1 diabetes. Type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes, there's no worse or better type. However, there are different things that people do go through with each type. Type 1, in my opinion, it's so hard for me to relate with somebody who has type 2 diabetes, and I'm sure they might feel the same, vice versa. You have to be a little easy on ourselves too. Again, we're dealing with a chronic disease, and it's so hard mentally, and never mind physically, to remember all these things. To remember before you go out, make sure you have something if you go low, make sure you bring an extra site, make sure you bring some extra insulin, anything you may need in case there's this emergency. I am thankful to say that I improved so much, really when it came down to responsibility, because I was very irresponsible with diabetes in my teenage years especially. And then once, kind of being on your own, not depending on a parent to remind you to take your insulin, to test yourself, you really have to learn. And I am so thankful that once my A1C was 11.5, I did not want to have any of these, I did not want to deal with any of the consequences of not taking care of myself. It legit scares me. And at the time, I was a very irresponsible diabetic where I did not understand the importance of taking care of myself. I always knew, look, I have a chronic disease, but I never thought of the future. I always thought about now, the decisions I'm making now. Whereas when you're making a decision, there's a compound effect to every decision, and every decision either has a positive or negative consequence. And then the road I was going, I was leading towards a negative consequence. I am so thankful where once my A1C hit a point of 11.5, I knew I was doing something wrong. I was like, you know what, like in the future, I want to live a happy, healthy life. And in order for me to do so, I need to take care of myself and I need to be more responsible and do what I'm supposed to do. So these are some of my confessions. But I could really take these confessions and belittle myself, feel negative about myself, and really go down a rabbit hole. Or I could take these confessions and use them as a learning experience and share them with others. I think it's so easy to look at social media, and especially people with diabetes who are showing, themselves living with diabetes and looking like it looks like this perfect picture. When in reality, social media just highlights your best moments, where we're all not going to highlight our DKA experiences. We're all not going to highlight the fact that we forgot to bolus. We're not going to highlight these types of things. However, there are some people that's great. They do share their experiences, and I find those experiences more inspiring, if anything, because it just shows that you're not alone and nobody's perfect. So I'm gonna take these confessions, I'm gonna learn from them, and make sure I don't repeat these same things over and over again. And if you are new to this channel, please don't hesitate to subscribe and like this video. Also, please comment, maybe share some of your experiences. Maybe it's time for you to give a confession.